Hey, I'm Nick Blevins. Welcome to episode 286 of the Family Ministry Podcast. In this episode, we talk with Brittany Nelson, who's on the podcast again. She's been on before, but we're talking about her new book, Time to Update. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see I'm holding a copy of the book up. If you're not, you can't see that. And you might want to consider watching on YouTube. I've started watching and listening to a lot of my favorite podcasts on YouTube, and I do like that experience more. But Brittany and I talk about her new book. The subtitle is 7 Areas to Integrate Digital Discipleship into Your Children's Ministry Strategy. So we have a lot of fun talking about what she put in the book, what she's seeing in churches in terms of digital and children's ministry and where they're coming together, what opportunities are still out there for leaders, where have leaders and churches maybe backed off some things in the digital space. You can get all the links and notes below if you're listening on YouTube or at nickblevins.com/episode 286. If you're listening on the audio version. Now, before we jump into the interview with Brittany, let's hear from our sponsors. If you're like me, you're asking new questions about what it means to lead your ministry. Like, what do we measure beyond attendance? How do we know if we're leading our ministries well? And are we handing the next generation a lasting, authentic kind of faith? I think these are the questions that we're all asking because it seems like everyone isn't coming back to our buildings like they used to. And even if they are, it still doesn't guarantee we're handing them a brighter future and a brighter faith. Plus, we want to reach new people who haven't connected with a church yet. I know our church does. So what if we could reframe what success looks like for the next year? Well, the Orange Tour is a day of live ministry training for you and your entire team. You'll learn what's new in culture, what's next developmentally for kids and teenagers in your church, and you'll show your team what it looks like to keep faith alive. My team will be in the Lancaster, Pennsylvania tour stop, so if you're there, make sure you find us and say hi. But wherever you are, Orange Tour is coming to a city near you. So bring your staff, your volunteers, parents, any leader who cares about the faith and future of the next generation to a one-day event guaranteed to spark ideas, collaboration, and innovation in your approach to ministry. It's a one-day event packed with practical training, and it only comes around once a year. So to find a location near you, to go to orangetour.org, but when you register, use the code MinistryBoost to save 10% at checkout. And if you're in Lancaster, make sure you say hi, but go to orangetour.org and use the code MinistryBoost to save 10%. Does your church use text messaging to communicate with your attenders and members and volunteers? If you don't, you should. And Clearstream is a text message solution built specifically for churches. It's what my church uses. We switched to it a little while back, and we have loved the experience so far. You can do all the things you normally can with a text message solution, such as like text to join keywords, where people can text in a keyword and then subscribe to a certain list. You can send mass messages to all kinds of people. You can individually text with people. We actually use it in my church for new attender follow-up. And one of our staff members that's responsible for that kind of has her own sub channel and can text people, and then they text back. Now, they probably think they're texting with her, like on her personal number, but they're not. They're texting through the Clearstream app, which is great because everybody can see it. If she's out, if there's multiple people on the team, they can all do that. One of my favorite things is probably the workflows, where you can subscribe somebody to a kind of a workflow where they get this text, and then, a week later they get this text. We've done a number of things with that. We did a 52 challenge where you get one verse in the Bible to read every week for a year. And it was so popular that after we ended it, people that were coming on like midway through or even after it was over wanted to do it. And so we set up a workflow where you can join at any point, get that, join that 52 challenge and get those verses every week. I use it a lot for volunteer recruitment. So I lead volunteer tours at our church to help recruit volunteers, and we communicate with them kind of heading into the tour, coming out of the tour. It integrates with a lot of church management systems. We use CCB, it integrates with that, but it integrates with the Rock, Planning Center, all kinds of things. So if you are currently not using a mass text message software for your church, or you are, but you're not happy with yours like we weren't, check out Clearstream at nickblevins.com/text. I know you'll love it. Well, today we have Brittany Nelson back on the podcast. Welcome back, Brittany.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. Well, give us an update of like what's going on in your life. There's something big that we're going to talk
Yeah.
about, right? But I don't even know how long it's been since you were last on the podcast. But if somebody hasn't heard of you, kind of give us an introduction of yourself, but also give us an update if they haven't heard you since the last time you were on.
Sure. So my name is Brittany Nelson. I run Deeper Kidmin, which is an online hub of creative resources made for children's ministry leaders by children's ministry leaders. So I tell people it's like the Teachers Pay Teachers or the Download Youth Ministry or like the digital Etsy of the children's ministry world. I'm based in the Atlanta area, just northeast of Atlanta in Georgia. My husband's a youth pastor. I'm a former children's pastor, but now I get to volunteer in children's ministry as a second grade small group leader. And we have two little girls, a 3.5-year-old and a 9-month-old. So we are still kind of in that first year with baby number 2 and figuring out what that looks like as a family of 4. But the biggest update that just happened is I wrote a book, which is
That's
so
great.
still weird to say out loud. But I wrote a book called Time to Update: 7 areas to integrate digital discipleship into your children's ministry strategy. Yeah, look
I
at
could
you.
I
Yeah,
could
I've got
display
my
it. Yeah,
copy.
I could just
Yes,
display it, right? Yes, you
yes.
did. Now I have to ask you, how long did it take you to write the book from beginning to end? Like
Um,
6 months,
including
a
including
year,
editing or just the writing part?
maybe just the writing part.
Okay, probably about a year and a half.
That's pretty good. And then
Yeah,
the
year and a
editing,
half.
how long did that take?
Probably about another year.
Another
All the
year?
editing and the formatting and just the whole
Yeah,
publishing process. But I wanted,
yeah.
so actually, I finished writing the book about 2 weeks before baby number 2 came, because I wanted to birth a book before I birthed a second baby. And so
Good idea.
that was my goal, was to get it written, and then I took a couple months off, as obviously to have a baby and to figure out what that looks like, and um, get through the newborn stage and past the sleep deprivation side of things, and then jumped back into editing and publishing. So all in all, about 2.5, almost 3 years. But lots of research, lots of interviews and conversations went into the book. So yeah, it was
That's
fun.
cool. Now, what would you, a lot of times people will say this is like how you should write a book, is you figure out what is the problem you're helping leaders solve
Mm,
or people solve or whatever that is. So what would you say that is for you with this book?
yeah. With writing this book, I really wanted, one, to give us, and us being like ministry leaders, I wanted to give us common language around the world of digital discipleship, because I think COVID kind of pushed us all into the deep end very quickly and we had to figure out what it meant. But then coming out of COVID, I realized there were certain things from COVID that we needed to continue to do, even not all of them, but some of it. And so wanted to provide some common language around what does digital discipleship even mean? But then I also wanted to help leaders understand that digital discipleship is a whole lot easier than most people think, right? It's not just live streaming your children's ministry or having a YouTube channel. Like, those things might be part of your digital discipleship strategy, but they're not the end all be all of digital discipleship. And so I really wanted to give people practical ideas and help them understand, like, hey, it's okay. Take a deep breath. Like, you're probably already using digital discipleship and you don't even realize it, but giving people more ideas of ways to implement it and be intentional about it in their ministry.
Yeah, when you first told me about the book, I did picture probably something different than when I got it and read it,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I pictured probably more of like the online. I think of
Hmm.
it during the pandemic when we had kids content online and
Yeah.
people were doing Zoom calls with kids, and things that in some, like most churches, I feel like have stopped doing that, or it's
Mm-hmm.
a fraction of what it was before. They're doing 10% of what they were doing during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
specifically in kids. I think with adults in the main service and some of that has stuck or stuck more, but with kids it feels
Sure.
like it's not what it was before. So most of what
Yeah.
we're going to talk about is probably not this question, but I'm still curious, especially since you
Yeah.
wrote a book, you've been on multiple podcasts, you've probably been having lots of conversations about it. What
Yeah.
do you see with churches specifically doing children's ministry stuff online? Is it they're mostly not doing it? Is there anybody doing anything that's fun and
Yeah, I
innovative?
feel like most people like swung back to nothing digital, right? Like, once they
Uh-huh.
got through COVID and in-person church and ministry came back, they're like, praise Jesus, right? Like, I can wash my hands of this and don't have to think about
Mm-hmm.
it anymore. So I feel like most churches have swung back completely to where they were pre-COVID in terms of the digital offerings that they have for their children's ministry. But I've seen a few churches maybe keep some of the elements, mostly in terms of like creating a YouTube channel for their children's ministry, or providing online curriculum that families can look at when they're at home, or if they missed a Sunday, a way for them to see part of the children's service, even from vacation or visiting grandparents' house or wherever they might have been, if someone was sick or whatever. But most people, I think, have scaled back drastically compared to when digital was our only option.
Yeah, I haven't seen many. I did interview some in the podcast where they're, and I don't know what it is today, but this wasn't that long ago. This wasn't 2021 or 2022, or if it was late last year. They had like a YouTube thing that was really good. It was like a show every week, but they were doing like fun games. It was almost like some version of Mr. Beast meets a Bible
Sure.
lesson, you know what I mean, kind of
Yep.
thing.
Yeah.
And it was crushing it. I mean, like 30,000 views a video, like
Yeah.
crazy. You know what I mean?
That's
And this church is
awesome.
large, but it's not that large. Like it's a church of, I don't know, 2 or 3,000 or something.
Mm.
Like not nearly clearly reaching an audience beyond,
Mm.
who attends their church. And that's like one example, literally, I could think of a church that was still doing something like that. I haven't seen many, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And some of it, I'm sure it was the case for us. It's return on investment. Like when the
Mm-hmm.
views come down to a certain point and the
Mm-hmm.
in-person's here, you're thinking, okay, we're spending that. So like we still put kids content on YouTube, but we're not doing our own bumpers for it. And before
Sure.
that, we were doing our own games and other hosting elements. Like it really scaled down from this big thing to
Yep.
like a little piece to like now it's just the content we get from our curriculum provider. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Which is
that's
okay, right? Because before
yeah,
that was our only option. So we had the capacity and the resources and the time to put everything into those digital methods, digital approaches. Whereas now, right, like it's just an added layer onto what leaders are already doing. So I think it's okay that we've scaled back in that sense of the digital discipleship world.
I agree. I think some of it is like if you like we want to reach our local community, not that we
Mm,
don't want to help people online. Even if you think of my church overall, it's not that we don't want to help people everywhere around the country and around the world. But we mostly are focused on our community. And if that's the case, then that landscape of YouTube beyond our community, it's
mm,
probably not worth putting all that energy into. Now, hopefully somebody is, because
sure.
there is a lot out there. You know what I mean? So like that church, like I mentioned, or there's a lot of independent YouTubers or whatever that are doing
Hmm.
some great
Hmm.
things. And so you want some of that out there, but if every church did it, it's not all going to be seen anyway,
Right.
right? Like 95% of it or more is just not going to be lost in the ether or whatever. All right. Well, let's talk more about like what the book is actually about, because it's not really
Sure.
as much about that,
Yeah.
more about leveraging digital in all these other areas,
Hmm.
which is, I think, was really helpful for leaders because they are doing most of these things. So then
Mm,
it's like, how do I leverage digital to do that as well? Let's
hmm.
talk website. You talk website early in the
Mm,
book. That is probably an area where a lot of churches could use an update. Definitely a time to update there. Um, Especially sometimes this is I mean, I'm sure everybody listening would agree because it's a family ministry podcast, but it's a pet peeve of mine when it's hard to find the kids or student ministry stuff on a
yes.
website. And I don't think I
100%.
just think that because I work in it. I also think it because as a parent,
Yeah.
there's a good chance you're reaching parents. And so
Hmm.
that should be, and their experiences also on Sunday. So what are some tips you give there? And I'd also love to get your thoughts
Mm,
on, more and more churches are trying to do some type of pre-check-in or something like
hmm.
that, like helping people take those little steps online. How can
Yeah.
churches and children's ministries leverage that?
Yeah. I think a simple like pre-check-in form online is super helpful, super valuable for churches to leverage just to have kind of a digital version of your registration form. So instead of families having to write out and fill out like a new kid card or whatever you call it at your church when they get there, they can do it online. One that lets you know that they're coming, right? So you can be more prepared for them. You can look out for them. And then when they walk in and say, hey, this is Jimmy. He's in second grade. We registered online. You can be like, oh yeah, Jimmy, we've been waiting for you, and like you can prep your volunteers. So it's a great tool not only to help your families feel welcome and feel more prepared and feel less rushed and confused on a Sunday morning. I think as ministry leaders, it's hard to remember what that first experience is like for a brand new family. When they walk into a church, they don't know where to go. They don't know where they're supposed to take their kids, right? And all of a sudden someone says, hey, I need you to fill out this form. And it's a front and back form with a bunch of questions, right? That they're like, wait, what? Like, okay, what's my kid's birthday again? Like how many of them are there and all that kind of stuff. And so I think having a pre-check form online is a great way to serve new families. It also lets the families know right away that safety is a priority for you, right? As a church. It helps those families know that you are thinking about their kids' safety, right? Because you want all this information on file so that you can make sure your kids are safe. So I think having a new kid registration form or some sort of like, hey, we're coming, like this, some information about our kids can be really, really valuable. And then I think the biggest mistake that I see a lot of churches have with their websites is it's just outdated, right? Like whether they have events from Christmas and it's July, like past Christmas, and it's July now, or they have pictures of kids who are now in high school, but like were in the kids ministry at one point, but have aged out. Like just being able to make those small changes and those small updates to a website can really give it a fresh look and really, yeah, just update it and make it look more user friendly for new families and more, just more inviting as they're kind of
Hmm.
trying to figure out if they want to come to your church or not.
Yeah, it's not fun, but like somebody's job, we have this at our church, and really it's probably a few people, but the buck stops somewhere where they'll say their job is every week to check the entire website, or at
Mm,
least pages that could be outdated. Um, Probably right after services on Sunday, like right after the weekend,
mm,
which could mean literally you'd have a reminder to do it before you leave on Sunday if you're last,
yeah.
like if you don't have Sunday night services or something. But
Hmm.
certainly Monday morning, and then maybe at the end of the week too, because like things can get outdated real quick. Like
Right.
I even we had an event a couple Sundays ago, and one of our folks was off, and I was like, I need to set a reminder because I bet you
Mm,
that won't get taken off, and I need to take it off right after it happens because otherwise Tuesday it's like, wait a minute, why is that still there? That was 2 days
right.
ago. That's
Yeah.
tough. That's interesting. I'm big on the pre-check-in forms. I don't
Mm,
I don't feel like we've had enough time to know how they're going to work, but we've had some success with that, with like getting, because a lot
mm,
of times you think, are people really going to do that? And we have had
yeah.
people do
Yeah.
that, even without kids, like kind of planning a visit.
Mm,
And one of the things we did a couple years ago that's I think has been good. Again, this is stuff that's a little harder to measure, but like when you plan a visit online with or without kids, you get an email with like even a video tour almost. So like if you're like one of those
mhm.
really high control people that needs to know exactly what I'm walking into, like you're going to feel good from this
Yeah.
email because you kind of get to see everything. But recently, my favorite thing, and this is the nerd in me that loves this, our church uses CCB as our management system, and
Okay.
we had a pre-check-in form, but really it didn't do anything other than
Mm,
like we could go in, and whoever the main contact was that filled out the form, you can automatically make a profile for them, but everybody
mm,
else you're doing manually. So like your
mm.
family, your husband, your kids, we're adding, manually,
Right.
which isn't
Right.
the end of the world. I would absolutely do that if you don't have any other choice. But recently I had a guy that I knew write code that would help use a Google
Oh,
form to actually create the stuff in
yep.
CCB. And the
Automate
family
it.
pastor in me and the nerd
Yeah.
is so happy. It's so great. We've had bumps along the way, but we've ironed most of those out now. But literally, people now can be right there in front of us too on a
Mm,
phone, fill out the form, hit submit,
mhm.
and 5 seconds later, if that, it's in the system and they can check in and go. And so
Yep.
the thing I really love about it is it used to be a while. I mean, it could be 10
Mhm.
minutes. You filling it
Yeah.
out, we got to type it in. I mean, that is not a great
Mhm.
experience. And then
Mhm.
now with them on the phone, I mean, I saw a mom holding her baby, put a coffee down, one hand with the phone, and she knocked it out in like under 2 minutes, and
Yeah.
then picked that coffee up with that phone. And I was like, this is amazing. This woman is a superhero.
Yeah, for
And
real.
then does the self check in and she's done,
Yeah.
and certainly under 3 minutes. So I do think that's important. The
Mm.
Your book talks a lot about how that's kind of like the new I don't know, the lobby or something, like that's where you're seeing
Mm.
people first now is online, like you're not
Yeah.
seeing them, but that's where they are first, so
Yep.
you got to
It's the
make a good
first
impression there.
impression. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
which I agree.
Yeah.
Have you, I don't know if your church that you attend, your husband works at, would see this, but like our staff page is one of the top 5 visited pages, and
Mm.
I think that's true of every church, and I think it's because that's
Sure.
another way people figure out, what are you like. Let me go
Mhm.
look at who your staff are and I
Mhm.
get a picture
Mhm.
of your church, both size, diversity, all those things, which
Yeah.
is that's important too then. Pictures.
Yeah.
And now of course some churches are going away from that, which is interesting.
Mm.
Well, let's talk curriculum. A lot of
Yeah.
digital elements to curriculum.
Mhm.
The and I guess I have two versions of this question. Do you think
Okay.
having digital elements in a curriculum is a must? And when I say digital elements, one version would be like the curriculum is in a digital format, but another
Mm.
version would be like media. Like, do
Right.
there are curriculums that still don't have like video content or whatever.
Right.
Do you think both of those are a must? Give it either, maybe not. What do you think?
I think yes, with an asterisk. So like yes, but so start with digital, like in the way that you access curriculum. Being able to access curriculum digitally, I think yes is an absolute must. That's why all of the resources on Deeper Kidmin are digital downloads, right? Like there's a reason that I think it's so valuable. But I think it saves you time. I think it can save you money in terms of, oh, we bought 100 books, but activity books, but only 70 kids came this month. Now, what do we do with these 30 extra activity books that we can't use anymore, right? Like it saves you space because things aren't just piling up. It makes it easier for you to communicate with your volunteers and to share the curriculum with them. It makes it easier a lot of times for you to modify the curriculum for your context. So when I was a children's pastor, we were a mobile church. So we met at a local high school. So our nursery was in the orchestra room. Our elementary kids met in the chorus room, and then the preschool was either in the hallway or like in one of the side classrooms. And so everything that we did had to be modified because of the space that we were in. And so digital curriculum makes it so much easier to modify curriculum for your context. And I've never met a children's pastor or family pastor that was like, yeah, we just pull it straight out of the box and use the curriculum exactly as it came, right? Like everyone is modifying it in some way. And digital, I think, really allows us to do that much, much easier, much easier. Um, and then when it comes to like elements within the curriculum, I don't think you have to have videos, right? Because the whole like screen time debate and all that kind of stuff, like that's a different conversation, right? But I do think some sort of digital media is important, even if it's just a graphic on a screen, because kids today are so visual, right? That like they respond more and engage more with graphics than with words or with listening, which some of you are listening are like, yes, they do, right? Like you experience that on Sunday. So I think having some sort of digital element as graphics, like as the basic, like bare minimum graphics on a screen or graphics that kids can see while you're teaching. Now, if it has a Bible story video, I think that's great. I think it's a great tool. I think it's a great supplement to in-person teaching. I'm not a fan, I'll be honest, of let's let the Bible story video teach the lesson for us and then just send kids off to a small group. I think the Bible lesson should still has more value when taught by a person. Now I know that not all churches can do that, or just with the way of their setup. But I still think Bible story video or videos are a great way to engage kids to help them hear the lesson in a new way. But yeah, I mean, bare minimum, I think we need to be using graphics on the screen for kids to be engaging visually with what we're teaching, even if it's something super simple.
Yeah, we do our parent child dedication a little differently now, where it's a separate event on Saturday mornings.
Mm,
And so you picture families around round tables with guests that they've invited. Kids are in the room. So picture a room full of kids like your youngest daughter's age, like full room, and so it's not very quiet, I guess is what I'm trying to get
right.
at.
It's a
And so
loud
like
room in
even
there.
yeah, when we're
There's
hosting on
experience
stage,
everywhere.
and we're very intentional about like everything needs to be short and like you
Sure.
can't spend. But what's really funny is the time when the room is quiet is when the video plays. Like a
Oh
video
yeah.
goes up for some reason. We're
Oh yeah.
playing like we'll use a few different videos, and so like literally even this last time that we thought about this, or as we were planning this one that's coming up in another month or two, we were like, hey, let's substitute that thing that was live with this other
Mm,
idea that is digital. And
mhm.
so and part of it's because we know
Yeah.
it changes pace, right? And
Yep.
literally we're talking about babies and they're like,
Mhm.
like looking up
Oh
there
yeah,
where they
they
look
love
at.
screens.
So funny. Okay, how about partnering with parents? Like again,
Yeah.
I love how the book just hits these core things.
Mhm,
Volunteers, which I didn't
mhm.
have a whole lot. We could probably do a whole other conversation about that. Um, actually, you and I talked about maybe talking about that during the upcoming Multiply Ministry Conference online. So that's like a
Yeah.
teaser, right? In the industry,
Yeah.
we'll hit that then. But you hit partnering with parents. So what are some of your
Mm,
favorite methods and tools
yeah.
for when it comes to partnering with parents digitally?
Well, I think first we have to recognize that parents are now like the parents in our ministries are digital natives too. And what that means is that a digital native is someone who was born into the world when at a time when the internet was just there and has always existed. And so digital natives don't know a time in their life without access to the internet. Now, obviously, that has changed and gone from desktop computers with dial up to like smartphones in our hands, right? Very different. But a digital native has always had access to the internet and the digital world. And parents in our ministry, the millennials, um, they're the first generation of digital natives, and they're having kids that are walking through your doors in your ministry. So for a long time, digital natives just meant the kids that we were serving, but now it includes the parents and the grown-ups of the kids that we're serving. So that means they're going to bring their technological preferences to the table, right? In terms of the way that they communicate, the way that parents want to interact and receive information is going to be different than in generations past. So I think one of my favorite ways that our children's pastor, I'll just use this example, one of my favorite ways that she serves us digitally as parents is provides Spotify playlists. She doesn't give us CDs anymore, which I'm thankful for because I don't even have a way to play a CD anymore. So she just makes Spotify playlists of songs that the kids are singing in church with in the children's ministry on Sunday. And so we can turn on that Spotify playlist in the car or when I'm cooking dinner or whatever. Um, So that's a really simple, like easy way. I think another way to serve parents is through social media. There are a lot of different parenting accounts that I follow on Instagram, whether it's like spiritual parenting or just like feeding littles, like anything and everything from sleep to eating to their spiritual lives. And there's some accounts that I follow that I look for every day because I'm like, oh, I wonder what they posted about today. Or I know they're in the middle of a Fruit of the Spirit series, or something like that. And they probably have amazing websites, but I've never been to their website. Like I've never gone and said, "Oh, let me see what they have on, on the web or whatever." Um, I always interact with them through Instagram. And so I think that's a really easy way to connect with parents too is maybe it's not Instagram for your church, right? Like find out where your parents hang out online, ask them what's the first app that they open every day? What does their screen time on their iPhone tell them is the most used app, right? Social media app in particular. Um, and then find ways to connect with them there and connect not only in like, hey, don't forget about this event or hey, church is at this time on Sunday, but connecting with them to encourage and equip them beyond just the kind of the reminders of things.
Yeah, and I think the reminders can be helpful too, but like
Mm,
you want kind of like the same thing you're talking about. You want to be able to connect in some other ways, and now it's definitely not a replacement for actual real community. But a lot of people
sure.
connect to each other digitally. So like
Hmm.
I always feel like, and this is something I always feel like we can do better at our church, but just connecting parents to one another.
Mm,
Sometimes it happens because they get in a small group or they're already friends with somebody or they serve with somebody. But I mean, a large percentage of our church families probably aren't well connected to other parents, in a
yeah.
way that they could do real life together. And
Mm,
that can start sometimes digitally with some
hmm.
tools like that. Well, what about? I'm thinking about you talk about social media in there,
Hmm.
and I'm thinking about. I don't know the answer to this. I don't know if I've ever even seen a church that does this. I know some churches that do social media well.
Mm.
I've interviewed some on the podcast, but if you said I'm going to ask you a question, I guess I don't know the answer to. I guess that's what I'm saying. What would a good weekly social media strategy for a children's ministry look
Mm.
like? Like, I don't know the answer for that for my church. I know things we've
Hmm.
tried, we've done this, this has not worked, that's worked, and even things that work in the digital world sometimes don't feel like they work that well. You know what I
Sure.
mean?
Yeah. Well, it always
17,
changes. So
17 views or whatever.
that's
Um,
inconvenient.
yes. So, what do you think there? Like, well,
Yeah.
and maybe it's different for different churches. I don't know, but what are your
Mm.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely different for different churches because like a successful weekly social media strategy is going to depend on the audience that you're trying to reach. So again, like I mentioned it before, ask your parents where they hang out online. If all of your parents are on Instagram, then like don't worry about Facebook so much, right? Like focus on Instagram. Um, so be where your people are is the first thing I would say. And then the second thing is just be consistent. So if you're a church that posts 2 or 3 times a day, every single day, like that's great. Like keep it up, right? Like keep going. But if you're a church that like posts maybe 2 or 3 times a week, that's okay. Just stay consistent. You don't want to have a strategy or a social media platform where you post a ton one week and then you're silent for 3 weeks and then you post some more for 2 weeks and then you're silent for a month. Like consistency is really important. And I think kind of too going back to what we just talked about with parents, right? Not just doing the reminders, but sharing the encouragement and the equipping and just the connecting, right? So one of my
Mm-hmm.
favorite things to do is post about fun random holidays. So like National Ice Cream Day is always the third Sunday in July in the United States. So just post a simple like, hey, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? And as you and your kids enjoy ice cream for National Ice Cream Day, talk about God's sweetness in your lives, right? Like something super
Yeah.
simple. Doesn't have to be, over the top, doesn't have to be super ridiculous. You don't even have to include the part about talking about God's sweetness. Like just ask people what their favorite ice cream flavor is because everyone has an opinion about that, right? So
Uh
it's
huh.
an easy way to engage people. But there's something called the 80-20 rule that kind of like the business world talks about a lot of 80% of your posts should be something that just give value to the listener, to your audience without asking for anything in return. And then 20% can be the stuff where you ask them to do something like show up at your church, come to an event, register for something. But then that 80% of your posts should be focused on, okay, what problem can I solve for them? How can I encourage them today? How can I connect them with someone else? How can I make them feel part of a community by voting on a poll? Like even something as simple as that can bring value to your social media. So it looks different for every church. There's not like one formula of like, oh, do X, Y, and Z, and you'll have the perfect social media strategy for your children's ministry. Because the digital world just changes too much, and the algorithms and everything all update too fast for us to be able to figure that out. But yeah, consistency, and then that 80-20 rule, like not letting your social media just be like a billboard for your announcements, but really creating it as a place that fosters community and engagement.
Yeah. I love that you know when National Ice Cream Day is by memory. That's amazing. That is awesome.
Shouldn't we all know?
we should. I should now commit that. I would rely on other things telling me, because that's also a day when sometimes you can get great deals on ice cream, locally. It depends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so, okay, another question for you that I didn't tell you I was going to ask, but since we have time, I want to ask about it. At the end of your book, you have a really comprehensive list of like tools, software, apps, things like that can help, and you have them kind of like by category. What are some of your favorite tools that children's ministry leaders could use in anything? And I bet you there are some that you use on Deeper Kidmin to manage that, right? That could also be used, I would think, in a church. So I know I'm putting you on the spot, but what do you like?
No, that's fine. I love this question because I love talking like productivity tools and all that kind of stuff. So Canva is the first one that comes to mind as a graphics creation tool. I don't know how. Like, I mean, I did do ministry without Canva. Like I was a children's pastor before Canva existed, but now I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. So I use Canva for Deeper Kidmin all the time, but it's a fantastic resource for children's ministry leaders to create social media posts, slides. Like if your curriculum doesn't come with graphics, you can quickly and easily create graphics, email headers, like any sort of promotional flyers, posters, like whatever you want to create. Canva is a fantastic tool to create some graphics for ministry. I think another one that I love is Asana, Asana. It's just a digital to-do list, basically. I'm a list person. I like to write things down and then be able to check things off when they're done. And so Asana is what I use. Trello is another one that helps me kind of organize ideas and brainstorm. And like when I'm planning events, I used it as a children's pastor to plan events and to kind of, put all my brainstorming ideas in one place, but then being able to organize them and delegate things that way. Planning Center, I don't know. I did use Planning Center as a children's pastor. And then I was on our church staff for a couple of years in an administrative role doing volunteer coordination. And I don't know how anyone does volunteer scheduling without Planning Center or something like it, right? Like,
yeah, I guess some other church management systems have that.
Right. Like something above Sign Up Genius, right? Like if you're still using Sign Up Genius, there's a whole world out there for you that there's so much more, right? So I think those are some of my favorite tools, digital tools that I use. What would you say, Nick?
Oh, great question. Well, we use Buffer for scheduling social media still. Not as much anymore though, because Twitter just isn't what it was for church leaders or church attenders. I mean, I love Twitter. It's still my favorite platform, but that's because I like the NFL, and that's where most of that news lives.
All the time.
Yeah, and I like technology and business. And so like those three things, it's great for me because it in some ways is like that easy news. Like that's where I know everything that's happening. It's not good, but that's where I know most of what's happening in the world. And a lot of times I find I some things that people don't even know about, I know about because of Twitter, because they don't care. Like who cares what is happening in the business world in this sector or whatever, like finance, things like that. But so because of that, Buffer hasn't been as big because now you can do Facebook and Instagram, since Facebook owns them both, through the Facebook scheduler. So actually I'd say we probably do that a little bit more. But Buffer was big because you could do all of those in one, which was huge. We use Trello at my church. I was going to ask you, do you use Trello and Asana? Because they're like the same idea, but very different look.
Yes. So yes, I use both. So I use Asana as like my to-do list. And then I use Trello as like a project management system, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So that's more like Asana's more like to-do list, right? Real specific in the weeds, and Trello's like when it's a big project. Yeah, it's funny. My staff like to use Google Sheets and just use that somehow to build out. and I'm not against it, but I am kind of
Sure.
against it. I keep saying, like, I literally just said the other day, why is that in Google Sheets? Why is that not in Trello?
Right.
And it's funny
Right.
because I think they hate me for that.
That's
But
funny.
for me, it's about repeatable. Like, and you could,
Right.
again, a well done Google Sheet is great. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Kenny Conley, a good friend of mine, he gave me
Mm-hmm.
a baby dedication planning sheet that they used to use where, and people are going to ask me for this now that I'm saying this in a video, which is fine. You put in the date of the dedication, and then it populates all the dates below for the promo and the planning. I did, or at least
Oh,
that's what
that's
ours does.
cool.
Yeah, he has one too that's a little
Mm.
different, but I made mine off of his idea, and so like you put in the date up here, and it just does the math.
Oh,
Now, of
that's
course, you'd have
cool.
to customize for your own church, but it does the math
Sure.
to say you should be sending this email then and doing this then
Oh,
and whatever.
that's
And
really
so
smart.
that's like not Trello. So that's where like Google Sheets, I'm like, well, I do like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like I can't
that's
do that
nice.
exactly. There might be some version of that in Trello or Sheets. I don't know. So it's funny reading that part of your book made me think about a long time ago. I created a PDF called 30 Apps for Family Ministry or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody should go download it because it is so out of date. And and I'm reading your thing is like, yeah, I mean, there's stuff in there that probably don't even exist anymore. But
Yeah.
like, I need a new version of that because again, going through your list. Actually, I don't. People should just go look at your list um, in your book because man, they are helpful. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
we're just talking about a few of them here, but I mean, our team now, my student ministry, our student pastors using Slack for student ministry communication,
Mm-hmm.
which we use Slack in a few different settings. It's one of those things where like you got to commit to it. Like if people
Mm-hmm.
aren't actually looking at it, then it's worthless. But as long as
Right.
they're committed to it, you can do everything there. Like you don't
Yeah.
have to have emails and text. And
Yep.
so,
Yeah.
and
We
I
used
think it's
Slack
going
at
well.
our church.
Do you?
Not our current church, but our previous church. We used Slack to communicate.
Yeah.
Well, especially since we were mobile. So like we didn't have
Yeah.
the ease of, oh, let me just walk down the hall and talk to them in their office real quick. Right. Like, so yeah, so we used Slack.
Yeah. And I do like it as long, but it's one of those things where like everybody has
Right.
to agree to use it. You
You have
can't
to
have
use
like,
it.
oh, I didn't see it because I didn't
Right.
use Slack for the last week and a half or
Yeah.
whatever. So, our team, even we use with Ministry Boost, we use an app, Marco Polo, a lot. Me and some of our
Mm-hmm.
friends, it's like a video messaging,
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Yep.
And I remember when our friend Kevin first told us, we're like, we're not doing this. And then, and now we live off of it, you know, like
Yeah.
there's a number of people I talk to all the time on Marco Polo. And
That's
I
funny.
jokingly call it Snapchat for old people.
Yeah.
But here's what I think is funny about it. I have gotten multiple young people on it who still use it today. So that I
Okay.
laugh at that because we've had different friends or people we've worked with that like they're 24 and they're like, what? I don't want to do that. And then they have to, and then I still see them active on there. I'm like, told you, it's not
That's
just for old
funny.
people.
Right.
But actually what's been great about that is some of our teams will use that. So the coach can
Mm.
communicate with their team. You can keep up throughout the week. Like you could literally, I mean, again, this is not what you want, but you could literally be like listening to that on the way into church that morning from when
Mm.
your coach sent it on Thursday, and
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be ready enough. Like you
Yeah.
still needed to set aside time to be ready with your curriculum, but you'll have caught up on that. So I just like tools like that make it easy to
Mm-hmm.
interact and communicate. And you list a ton of them in there, but those are some of the ones that come to mind for me.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, how can people connect with you? What's the best way for them to get the book? I think you give the
Yeah.
audio version away free.
Yep. Yes. So you can get the book on Amazon. It's available as an ebook or print book. And then when you purchase either of those versions, you get the audiobook for free as well. It's hopefully also going to be available on Audible soon. I'm just waiting on Amazon to tell me that they've approved it, but they've had it for like 2 weeks. So we'll see. TBD. But yeah, so you can find the book on Amazon, Time to Update by Brittany Nelson. You can find us online at deeperkidmin.com. There's more information about the book at deeperkidmin.com/time to update. Find us on social media at deeperkidmin. And yeah, let's be friends online. I'd love to connect with you.
And use and leverage digital, right, to make connections,
Yes.
just like we're talking about at your church. That's awesome. Well, Brittany, congratulations, writing your first book. I know there's probably more to come, and I know that's a big undertaking. And congrats with Deeper Kidmin and how that's grown and how that's served children's ministry leaders. It's just a great thing. Thanks for coming on the
Thanks so much.
podcast.
Thanks so much, Nick.
Well, it was great to have Brittany back on the podcast again and talk about her new book. So proud of her. Congratulations for writing this book to her. Such an amazing thing. Obviously, action step 1 is to get the book. Action step 2 is to implement an idea from one section of the book. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see I'm paging through it here, but like a section on partnering with parents. Just pick one. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's connecting with volunteers. Maybe it's social media. Like I would start with one section and one idea, and implement that and then move on. What's another idea in that section, or maybe it's a whole different section that you're going to check out. But then the other action step, the third action step, would be to go to the back of the book there and look for the tools and apps and things like that, and figure out which of these tools and apps and resources and this tech should you use in your ministry to make things better. We kind of ended the conversation there talking about what we both like, and man, that does help ministry be more productive, get things done faster, which we all want to do for sure. So again, check out the notes below in the description on YouTube or at nickblevins.com/episode 286. Be sure to check out Clearstream if you're not using text messaging for your church. And I hope to see you at the Orange Tour. I'll be at the Lancaster stop. You're probably not going to be there considering how many people listen and where you all are located around the country and probably outside the country. But if you've got an Orange Tour stop near you, I would encourage you to check it out, and don't go alone. Take other staff, take volunteers. I believe your pastor can attend for free. So that's a lot of fun. Invite them. I'd love to hear about your experience there. And if you are at the Lancaster Orange Tour stop, come see me. It'd be great to meet you in person. Thanks for listening to this episode. We'll be back with another great episode next week on the Family Ministry Podcast.